Hi and welcome to session 3 of 3D character modelling and animation. What we're going to go through today is some basic basic stuff, which is sort of modelling type stuff, but basically finishing the mesh off. I've been through a few in the last session, but I'm gonna stick to the tutorial and just demonstrate what's in this tutorial. I think I showed you some extra stuff that I should have shown you in this session, but I'll demo it again because it doesn't harm to do it again, and those that understand it can skip through it quite quickly. But I may or may not talk about certain things that I didn't talk about last time, so it's pretty wise to listen to it all. What I want to go through is I want to sort of talk you through mirroring the mesh and ins and outs of that. I want to also talk to you about using a referencing modelling technique, which is involved in the mirroring the mesh. I want to talk a little bit about layers and some organisational stuff and some efficiencies for modelling. Hopefully by the end of this session you will have put this character together. It'll be finished and ready to go into the texturing stage. Okay, right, so the first thing I want to start off is to talk a little bit about mirroring the mesh. Now, I have spoken about this before, but again, I'll take you through it. So at the moment, what we've got here is a character that I've spent a bit more time on. The model is much more refined. So just to highlight certain things, the hand has been, there's a bit more time on it, and I could spend more time on this mesh. It's still quite a simplistic hand, but just note how the fingers aren't coming out quite straight, they're slightly angled. Also note how there's this certain shape and form in them, but also how the thumb, can you see how the thumb is not pointing at the same, like a tennis bat, isn't pointing straight up, it's kind of on a 45-degree angle to the fingers. That's something that people don't do enough of. Don't worry necessarily about putting nails and things in there and adding all that extra detail. It does really depend on the type of mesh that you're going to be doing, to how much you spend your time on that, and also consider like the curves in the hand and stuff. I've put these extra little shapes around the fingers to give it a bit more definition, so it doesn't sort of lose its power towards the end of the finger, which is a bizarre thing to say, but what I mean by that is it has that bulbous effect. So when I smooth it, you can see it doesn't just go straight like some kind of, it helps with the uniformity, and you'll see what the shape of the thumb has been manipulated for that same reason. So that's kind of why I've done that. So if I now go to the things like the feet, again I've made quite a characterised foot. I just grab this and I can just zoom into it. So again, I've gone over the top a little bit on the design of it, but again I wanted to put some character into it. I didn't necessarily need to put all the laces and things in there, but you can see it's still quite a simple topology around most of the foot. You can also hopefully notice that I've made it so it's got the flat edge to the foot and a round corner to define left and right. Don't fall into the habit of making generic feet that look a bit weird, and I've sort of offset certain things and put angles into certain things in certain areas. But again, it's personal preference and it's to do with the design of your character. But you can see most of the character is pretty generic. The face, because this module is not about facial animation, it doesn't have to be too complicated. Doesn't necessarily have to be as complicated as this even. You could just do a simple shape at the top of the head, but I put this simple kind of shape in here with a good topology, quite basic but quite efficient topology with the edge loops around the face and the edge loops around the eyes. Note also that I've put the eye in there because that enables me to work on the way that this actually moves around the eye. I've also, if you notice, I've used the eye is green. I used a tool called Make Live, which is this tool to work around the eye. So when you press this tool here and select your vertex, you can actually move it and it actually stays on the surface of the eye. That enables you to work around, oh sorry, wrong keyboard shortcut there. That enables you to work around the eye and make it so it's going to fit into that eye socket, which is quite a useful thing to do. Okay, so now we're ready to move on to the next stage. So I asked you to get your model to this kind of level within this week, because obviously for obvious reasons. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take you through sorting this character out. So the first thing I need to do is, and I've actually done this on this mesh already, so I slightly apologise for that. I'm just going to rectify a few problems here. So, Guy. I'll name things. You'll notice that, I'll introduce some kind of some idiosyncrasy there. So I'll take the actually no, I won't do it on that, I'll do it on the hand, just so I can, so if I grab a certain parts and just just do a change here. The reason why I'm doing this is because I want to manipulate this. If I put some deformers and things on there, so if I go in and I don't know, let's go for an extrude, just for kind of, alright, let me just extrude, like some kind of t-shirt type thing. The reason why I've done that was basically because I want to describe to you what is good practice. So you will probably have lots of history here. Actually, what I'll do is I'll undo that because it's just introducing problems into the model. You will almost certainly have a long history here of stuff that's you've done to it. So extruding, you've been moving stuff, you've been scaling stuff. These will all be strange numbers and stuff. So just to remind you, I'm sure I've already said this again, but you need to sort of make sure the model's clean before you move to the next step. So I'm gonna modify and I'm gonna freeze transformations. I didn't really need to do that because there wasn't anything there, but it's good practice to get into. I'm gonna reset transformations. Now, what resetting transformations does is if you go in and look at where the pivot point is down at the bottom, I'd make it a bit larger by pressing the plus and minus key. If I would have had my pivot point not in the direct center, when I mirror the character, it would have made a mistake. So so for example, if I have the pivot point there by mistake, and I mirror this on this axis, I'll show you what happens. It does this kind of thing. So you're not going to get a true mirror. So basically, what you do is you modify freeze transformations and modify reset transformations. Two good things to do to sort of get you into the habit of working effectively. So freezing basically sorts out the inbox, not the inbox. It sorts out the numbers here, and resetting. Freezing and then resetting sorts out your pivot point and make sure that it's a nice even model. Now that's quite an important thing to do when you certainly come to the next stage like rigging and stuff, because it's vitally important to make sure that you've got a nice clean rig, but also clean character and stuff for the next stage. So one other thing I want to do is I want to check. So let me just have a quick look at this. If I go to my orthographic views here. Because we're going to mirror this on an axis, you spot an issue here. You'll see here that there's not a straight line down here. Now these points are going to be mirrored across, and I'm eventually going to merge them together. But you'll see, if I zoom really close, that some of these are actually on the line here. Now we are talking about very small amounts here. We can see that isn't actually on this main graph line. Now obviously, if we're going to mirror this, it's going to cause us some slight problems in the future. So what I want to do is use a tool. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to select everything that's along here. Oh, sorry, pressing the wrong keyboard shortcut there. So I'm going to come in here and make sure I've not selected any of the verts. So I've selected all my verts down the central line. Now you're never going to be absolutely sure that you've got them all perfectly aligned along that grid, because you've been modelling. But what we can do is I can show you the numerical values here. So if I come in and go to Window and General Editors and Component Editor, what this is I want to, if you hit the Polygons tab, what we want to do is, if you look at this, we want to make sure that on the X they're all on 0. Okay. Now if you look on this X here, you can see that there's quite a few different variations of numbers there. Now they're all very close to 0, but they're clearly not on 0. And because we're going to mirror this, it's going to be an issue. So if I come in here, apologies for the noise in the background. Somebody's grinding away on the roof. So if I type in 0 here, okay, I've typed in 0 and hit return, and you can see now they've all gone to 0. And if I move in closely here, you'll see that they'll all be on that line. Now it's just a quick way of making sure that they're all there. I could have scaled them and kind of mess around and snap them onto the line, but to be honest, that's just a much quicker way of doing it. Okay. So what I'm going to do before I do anything else, I'm going to save this character, because this is kind of ready to mirror now. So if I save this scene as, and let's go for in here, let's go for mirror. So I'm gonna put it somewhere else for the time being. So then save it there. Okay, so that's ready to go to the next stage. Let me just double check my notes. I'm not missing anything out when I'm going along. Okay, so we've got a nice clean mesh that's ready to go. Okay, so let's mirror this. So if I select this, and the method we're going to use here to mirror it is like it's an instancing method. So if I come into my my duplicate special options, what we're going to do is I'm just going to reset that. Okay. Now the default here is to copy, and just for making normal copies of things. But we want to use something called instance, which means that if I duplicate this and then move it away to somewhere else, it's going to update with the other version. So this is kind of quite useful. If I was making a football stadium, for example, and I had loads of chairs that I needed to be the same across the whole football stadium, I would instance the one of them, and I would update that one, and it would update everything. It's an efficient way of working. But in this instance, what I want to do is I want to make sure that I want to scale this so it's the same on both sides. So I'm going to put a negative in the x. So these are x, y, z. So the x scale, and I'm gonna duplicate that. Now, clearly, what you can see here is that it's duplicate the mesh, which is no surprise. But what also I want to do, if I just quickly show you where it does, if I select this area here and move it, it updates on both sides. Now that's pretty useful for doing that, but unfortunately what you can do is you can accidentally make mistakes and select either side. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to make a layer. So I'm going to put this, okay, why is it not coming up? So I double click on that, it should bring me a dialog box up. I think I'm having a problem with Maya here, that it's not opening a dialog box. Let's not worry about that. I'll probably... what should happen here is I should double click it, and it should open up a dialog box. I think I'm used to using a dual screen monitor, and this is actually a single. I'm doing it on my laptop here. The actual the windows come up on the other screen, but because I've not got another screen plugged in, that's probably what's happened. All I was going to do is rename that by double clicking and renaming it. So you don't actually need to do that. But what I'm going to do is I've added a layer now. So what I also want to do is I want to add this layer, and I want to put this layer in, put it in R here, which is kind of like referencing it, which means that I can't select it. So that means that I'm going to carry on modelling on this side. So I could do something like, I don't know, if I go to my vertex, let's do something interesting here. Actually, while we're at it, I'm going to show you a different type of tool. If I open up my tool options for the move, okay, and I want to use this thing called soft selection. Now, what this does is quite useful at this stage. You'll see that there's like a gradient here, and there's a gradient here, and this gradient corresponds to it. But if I press my B button and I increase that gradient, what I can do is I can select an area, and I can actually do, you know, quite substantial changes. So let's say I wanted to give this guy a bit more form in certain areas, you know. I can also do things like scaling it, so I can, knowing that I can, oh, you see there's an issue there because the tools come around to the front of the leg. So what I need to do is I need to select this, and I need to press B and make it a bit smaller. I can do one of a few things at the same time, and start giving this guy, if I wanted to, if it was such a bizarre thing to say. Let's say I was making, I don't know, someone from Bugs Life, you know. Don't worry about these. I'll sort those issues out later. But you can see how you could quite quickly begin, if I press B and make that a bit larger, to change this shape quite considerably. You know, and it enables you. I mean, other things as well. Like let's say we select one vert on the head. Right, you can see there, if I come in and I scale that, I can kind of uniformly and quite comfortably do some interesting work here with a tool which is reasonably straightforward to use. So that I can scale it, but I can also move it with a fall off. Okay. Now at the moment this manipulator handle is too big, so I'm just going to press the negative key just to enable me to kind of get a closer view on that manipulator. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but what I'm saying is you can quite quickly change or start to change the size of the actual character quite significantly. You know, quite like that, actually. It's something unusual. It's like it reminds me of the Bugs Life characters. I've also made some miscues on here, and I would still need to, if I get rid of this and I come back to my vertex tool, I can still go in and I can select. If I turn the soft selection off, I can still select the verts that I want to put on 0, like here. So I'll do that. And if I come into my window General Editors component editor, and the same deal as before. If I type in 0 there, I'll just show you what happens. So 0, like that. So obviously, because I've got this setup working with this kind of this dual thing going on, I can make quite substantial changes, and I've just quickly rectified the problem there. There's still a slight problem, or is it? No, it's not, it's just the topology. But you can see I can kind of make sure that I work in a kind of an efficient way. Another tool which you might find quite useful while we're talking about this type of area is this tool, Sculpt Geometry tool. Now I think I may have talked about this already, but I'll just quickly go over it again because it's in this tutorial. But you know, you got these two operations here. One is called relax, and one is called smooth. The ones that I'm interested in anyway. And obviously, what you can do here is you can change. You can basically, well, I'll just probably to show you what's going on with it. So let's go to an area that's maybe problematic. So let's just think like the head. It's not problematic, but it's not. You know, we'll do. But if I start pressing it, what's actually happening? This is a good example of it actually. Again, press the B tool to make it smaller. What it's doing, it's starting to average out these the topology in these areas. And what you're looking for is nice, smooth lines going along the topology that you want. Okay. So you know, especially in areas that you know that are going to be seen. You know, so for example, there's probably needs to be some more edge loops in there. But if I start coming in here and pressing in this area, it's going to average out these edge loops that are already there, and you can see the topology there is starting to look better already. Okay, and it's a matter of, obviously you lose something by doing too many edges, but you can see there already it looks better because your spacing is a bit more equal in those kind of areas. But obviously you got some problems in the lips area there because you might not want that spacing, you might want to keep that spacing. So it depends, you know, that's why you make the tool bigger and smaller. But this is quite a useful tool at this kind of stage in the production. Let me just remind myself what else I'm going to talk about. Okay, I'm going to finish this sort of character off. So let's assume that we're pretty happy at this stage. One thing I do want to talk about actually, if I just take that referencing off, so we've got both, we can access both characters. Often when you're making a character, you want to make sure that it's not the same on both sides. Now, at the moment, because we're using this method where I'm working on one side and it's transferring to the other, I'm okay with that. But I want to stop this process now and carry on modelling a little bit more to add some more idiosyncrasies into the character. Because basically, when you're looking at characters which are the same on both sides, it's not ideal because it replicates a computer. So computers do this very well, but no humans are the same in both sides of their bodies or their faces or whatever. You know, my left foot is bigger than my right foot. My right hand has got different types of lines on them because of the way I use it. Even down to, I'm not sure whether you're aware of this or not, but even down to if you're a lorry driver in France and a lorry driver in the UK, you have different aging on different sides of your face because the sunlight hits the right. If you're in England, it hits the right hand side of you by driving, whereas in France it hits the left hand side of you. So even down to small things like that, to add subconscious idiosyncrasies to the model is actually a really good idea. Anyway, without going on too much about that, what I want to do is I want to do something. I want to merge this model. So actually, I'll do that in a second. I want to combine it first. So I'm combining this model to make it into one model now. The other thing I want to now, that's great that you've combined it, and it might appear to look pretty normal at this stage, okay? But if you look, there's still got this hole in the middle, okay? Now, what's happened there is because you've got these verts on top of each other, and because we've made sure that they're in the same place because of our, you know, by using the component editor, we want to make sure these tools are now these faces are now merged. So what I'm going to do, I don't have to be that accurate here. I want to make a selection around the verts that I know are on top of each other. Don't go in and try and pick them individually because you won't get all of them. You know, I'm not saying that you have to make this kind of selection, and you might want to be more accurate by going in here and trying not to get as many of the verts. Now this is slightly problematic because it'll take you a while, but there's a way around this problem. So if I come in and I go to my merge tool, again, I think I may have told you this, but I can't remember whether I have or not, so I'm going to go through it again. This merge tool, what it does is it's taking those verts that are on top of each other, and this number here, if I typed in 1 here, okay, and press apply, it basically merges everything that's together within one unit. So you can see that's clearly not what we want, okay. I mean, you could go through them individually and do them individually, but it would take you a long time. So what I'm going to do, the default here is quite small. I'm going to make it even smaller because I know that the verts that I want are on top of each other. So if I put an extra 0 in there and press apply, and just double check on some of the smaller areas. So let's go into the mouth, for example, in there. I've just selected 1, and you can see it's actually joined together. Okay, that's kind of what we want, and it'll have done it certainly will have done it in these areas. So this is now a genuinely congruent mesh. Okay, so that's ready, and it's ready for some idiosyncrasies. So again, you can either use this soft selection and come in and do things like grab. I wouldn't do too much of the main structure of the character, but what you can do is you can do certain things like I don't know. Let's say this guy is right-handed, right? Now let's make the assumption that a right-handed person has a thicker right arm because they use it more often, okay? That's a bit vertical, so it's a long shot, but let's, we can give him a bit more kind of deformation in his right hand. Now let's also make the assumption that, let's just stick some slight differences in here. I mean, this really is about personal preference at this stage. So let's go. I'm going to go to the vertex mode. I'm going to, put some very, very slight idiosyncrasies in the cheeks and stuff. Now these are small enough not to really see the differences, but they will add some really nice variation to the character. Sounds a really strange thing to do, and there is method to my madness here, but it's something which really will, after a little bit of time, help. Okay, right. So I've put some very small things in there, and it's up to you how you're going to deal with that. I mean, obviously this is not a great character because I've made his rear end very uncharacteristically not him. But again, it's how you go on and characterize the character. Now, let's make the assumption that you've spent a bit of time working on this and you're kind of ready to go. The one things I want to do, I want to, again, out of habit, I want to edit, delete by type, history, clean that up. Make sure that we name this, so guy, yeah, whatever, guy, let's call guy 1 there. Let's just call this guy underscore mesh. Okay, now let's modify freeze transformations, modify reset transformations, and let's save this little fella. So save scene as, so let's call him 25, and let's call that, I don't know, ready to texture. Okay, so again, I'm saving it. It's kind of very specific to what the next task that's going to happen. So if I need to go back, and I can then go back and deal with that character and change some things if I need to. One thing that I want to mention here is, and again I think I might have mentioned it, but I'm not sure how much detail I went into, is about if you get any problems. I mean, this is the kind of stage that you might start getting some problems at. I've cleaned the mesh, I've got it all ready, I've named everything, I've deleted history and this, that and the other. But what sometimes can happen if you've got quite a complicated character, or if you've got something that you've got a long history with, and you've not, you might have introduced some bugs into the process. What's sometimes a good idea, if I make that selection and export selected as ready to texture, okay, so I'm going to export, no, I'm going to change that to temp. So I want to export that selection, okay. Now, what I would recommend doing is closing Maya down and making a brand new scene. So if I make it a new scene, okay, but I want to also then I want to bring this little guy back in. So if what I was going to do, I was going to import it as well. So if I then go and import this scene, right? Now what this has done, and I think I might have just told you not without doing it. It's also, if you look, it's got rid of the eyes, but that's not a big deal. But what I've done here is I've basically, on purpose, I've stripped out any rubbish that might be in the scene. So let's say you made a character, and in the hypershade, I've got a mental block now. In here anyway, the hypergraph. Yeah, hypergraph. What you'll, I'm sorry, they're all called hyper something, so I get confused. In the hypergraph, what you'll find is you might sometimes find some arbitrary nodes and things, and some old, some old things that you might have used in the, deformer type things, or or kind of arbitrary things that are knocking about. By doing this, what you've done is you've cleaned the mesh up really quite carefully. You obviously need to rename stuff, so guy, whatever it is, to kind of get it nice and clean again. But this is a really good way of fixing bugs in scenes, and this now is a scene that is ready to go with the next stage, and it'll strip any rubbish out of the scene. So yeah, so what I'd like people to do by next week, we're going to go into texturing next week, so I'd like people to get up to this kind of stage for next week, because we're going to go to the next stage. And I think that's about it, so thank you very much, and good luck with your modelling.